Hello, everyone. Welcome to this CMS webinar on Belt and Road, the view from CEE. I'm Marcin, a partner at CMS Poland, specializing in infrastructure and projects. I'm your chair for today. And first of all, I will introduce you to our speakers. I will open today's webinar by saying a couple of words about CMS survey on the BRI in CEE, and by introducing you to some of the findings of our research and some key legal considerations regarding BRI projects in CEE. We are delighted to welcome our guest, Ze Chu. Ze is head of the China desk in CEE at international tax and accountancy firm Mazars. Ze is based in Poland and joins us today to give his perspective on level of Chinese activity in the region. Ze will tell us about his perspective in the fifth part of our webinar. Nicolas Zhu is a partner at CMS China, specializing in corporate and commercial law. Nicolas works with international and foreign investors in China and is very well placed to talk to us about the sentiment of Chinese businesses that are active in BRI projects and how this compares to that in CEE. Nicolas will share his view just after my part. Konstantin Silverstov is the head of energy projects and construction group at CMS in CEE and has been working extensively with a number of Chinese businesses investing into the region. He will reflect on the results of our study with regards into the region. He will reflect on the results of our study survey that I would like to present to you. And finally, Vladimir Zenin is a corporate partner at CMS Russia. Vladimir has worked extensively across the oil and gas, mining, power, and infrastructure sectors. And he will talk to us about why Russia has seen high levels of BRI activity and its key features. Before we begin our BRI-related presentation, please let me also inform you about some housekeeping rules. This webinar we plan will last approximately 1 hour, including a short Q&A session at the end. You will be kept on mute throughout, but able to ask questions in writing using the question box, and we encourage you to send us questions throughout the webinar. If we are unable to address your questions during the webinar, we'll aim to get back to you by email. And this webinar is recorded, so it will provide you with chances to get back to the presentation that we will give today. Let's start with a couple of words about BRI itself. BRI is a very ambitious development strategy adopted by China to develop transnational land and sea corridors, which will support trade and economic development and integration of the various regions of the world. BRI may be characterized as one of the largest infrastructure projects in history. BRI seeks to support priorities such as policy coordination, connectivity, unimpeded trade, financial integration, and connecting people. There is no official database of BRI projects, and there's international consensus on exactly what constitutes a BRI project. But most observers believe that over 3,000 BRI projects have already been started in the world, and around 130 countries declared their willingness to be involved to this initiative. In April 2019, a new phase of BRI was announced by President Xi Jinping at the second BRI forum at Bejm. It was described as BRI 2.0. BRI 2.0 addresses many of the points that concern international participants so far. Under BRI 2.0, China declared its strong commitment for developing a more inclusive, transparent, and sustainable approach to BRI projects. This means that there should be more engagement in the BRI projects from China private sector and more willingness on the part of Chinese state-owned companies to engage into the BRI projects with international infrastructure investors and lenders. In the future, the BRI will be about building both hard and economic infrastructure. The success of the BRI projects will also depend on their financial and ESG sustainability. This is fully in line with Chinese new aspirations to become a global green leader. We believe that transport, telecommunication, utilities, digital infrastructure, renewables, and clean energy should be the areas with the highest potential for growth and private sector participation under the BRI in the forthcoming years. And the BRI is now being impacted by geopolitical tension, COVID-19, but officially continues to be a priority for China and other nations involved. If there is such a thing as BRI countries, then CEE certainly has a great density of countries with this potential, greater than anywhere else in the world. Every CEE nation has signed up to the Belt and Road Initiative. Many CEE nations sit on the key trade routes identified by China in its original description of BRI. All of them have huge infrastructure gap and consequently a huge need to procure its infrastructure faster. But many CEE nations are reported to be disappointed by a number of BRI projects they have seen to date. Although infrastructure investment is needed across the region, the number of BRI projects that have gone ahead is still relatively small. There has, of course, been Chinese activity in CEE, but the great expectations have not yet been realized. Nevertheless, China still has big ambitions for CEE. For example, it would like to create a logistic corridor running from Greece throughout the Balkans into the Central and Western Europe. This should cut shipping time for Chinese export to Europe by a week or more, with goods able to travel through the Arabian Sea and the Suez Canal to Piraeus, and rather than taking road through the Atlantic or Northern European ports. In 2020, CMS and Major Market surveyed over 500 senior executives to gauge their views on investing opportunities and risk along the trade corridors of the Belt and Road Initiative. There were 500 plus respondents, 400 were non-Chinese multinational corporations, including 50 people focused on CEE and 100 were Chinese state-owned enterprises and privately owned corporations. All respondents were either currently active or planning to participate in BRI projects in the near term. The result of our survey is contained in 6 regional focused reports covering all major BRI jurisdictions. The key BRI findings for China and Asia Pacific have already been covered in the first 2 reports in the series that we issued, and we are pleased to launch the report focused on CEE today. And you will be able to download this report from tomorrow at CMS site, cms.law/BRI. Today we only have time to take you through some of the highlights of our survey, and there is much more research and analysis available. If you would like to have a more detailed discussion about our report and the situation in CEE relating to BRI, how it is now relevant to your business, please contact any of our speakers today. What conclusions did the survey bring to us when it comes to the prospects of the BRI in CEE? We noticed that 27% of the CEE respondents in our survey expect to increase their involvement in BRI-related projects, leaving a clear majority of 60% who say they expect to be involved less. It may mean that enthusiasm for the BRI in CEE has cooled somewhat over the last 2 years, but the weakening sentiment may partly reflect the experience. 71% of the respondents generally felt BRI involvement more challenging than they had expected. This is 8 percentage points above the average of the world and significantly above that 40% of the Chinese respondent that reported the same. The top sectors for future CEE investment relating to BRI that our respondent indicated are energy networks, roads, renewables, and hydro plus logistics. CEE-based respondents will continue to look to their own region for projects. It was the answer given to us by 99% of respondents. 49 of MENA respondents confirmed that they would be looking for opportunities in CEE and Russia. CEE was firmly favored by Chinese respondents too, with 40% confirming that they would be looking for opportunities to participate in BRI projects in CEE. Our CEE respondents told us what key obstacles they identified that negatively affect BRI projects in CEE, and legal frameworks, operational difficulties, and political issues are by far the most frequent cited obstacles to BRI activity in CEE, but as they tend to be in other regions as well. In CEE countries, BRI projects do not enjoy any special legal or tax treatment that could differentiate them from other infrastructure projects. No specific BRI regulations exist to cover zoning issues, permits, contractual setup, subcontracting. And there are no systemic obstacles that would make BRI projects more complex or challenging than any similar large infrastructure energy projects in the region. And in addition, no CEE country plans to introduce the BRI's specific regulations. Consequently, well, these legal considerations for BRI projects in CEE are similar to those which relate to large infrastructure projects in this part of the world in general. And these are limitation on the private ownership of many infrastructure assets, a lack of sovereign guarantees for large projects, potential unavailability of project finance for mega projects in the region, foreign ownership restrictions, inefficiencies in court systems that may affect enforcement in local courts, bureaucracy, and complex process for securing permits. Whilst BRI activity in CEE has been low so far, based on our survey, we see strong reasons to be positive about BRI potential in the future for the CEE, because as it flows from our survey, BRI could help provide the investment needed in CEE. That's what our respondents believe. CEE is in a strategic position for China trade routes, considerable BRI activity already in Russia and CIS region, and geopolitically stable. Our region is so geopolitically stable compared to other BRI regions. In a nutshell, it was a summary of facts explaining how the BRI is perceived from CEE perspective by professionals doing business and investment in CEE and from the perspective of the Chinese investors. I believe that it sets the scene well for us to talk about China's sentiment on BRI and BRI 2.0. And now I will give the floor to Nicholas, who will tell us more about how Chinese participants to BRI projects see perspective for further development of this initiative in abroad and especially in CEE. Nicholas, floor is yours. Nicholas, I'm afraid that we can't hear you, and we'll do our best to fix this issue as soon as possible. And I believe that in the meantime, it would make sense if we give floor to Costa, giving you, Nicholas, some time to resolve the problems with sound. Costa, could you tell us a bit about?
Can you hear us? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Thanks to everyone listening. Sorry for the technical difficulties we are facing. So let us move to point 3 of our webinar, which is devoted to the results of the survey on working with Chinese partners, as well as some of our own experience with that. So, focusing on the results of the survey, as you can see, joint ventures and other partnership are well suited for BRI projects. Pooling resourcing and knowledge can help mitigate risk, and it can also help share skills, encourage local acceptance, and move projects forward much more rapidly. But as we can see from the percentages shown on the screen, many CEE participants find them unappealing. The reasons for that are different. Over half of the participants find that they have not participated in those partnerships because they are not considering it as favorable, while a large majority also believes that that similar projects will develop without having those partnerships in place. It demonstrates also a significant concern in desirability of those projects. What we see is clearly that the Chinese respondents are much more willing to enter into joint ventures compared to the CEE counterparts. What it also shows is that the experience for the ones that have already entered into joint ventures in the past is quite mixed. 29% of those who responded are positive about the experience, while 30% are dissatisfied, leaving around 41% being neutral about the experience that they had with joint ventures. It is not just challenge for the counterparties, it is also challenge for the Chinese participants, those joint ventures on BRI projects. The Chinese participants also face challenges finding the right partner. As one banker from China points out, one of the major hurdles that the bank faced was finding the right local partners on the host countries, and this is what the survey also demonstrates. The majority of the CEE respondents have encountered difficulties while working with Chinese firms on such projects. A vast majority, 85% of the respondents, report some degree of difficulties in these working relationships. So as you can see, it is generally more difficult to work with Chinese partners or counterparties on those projects compared to the non-BRI projects. Now we are moving more into my personal experience, having worked with Asian clients and Asian counterparts for more than 20 years now, and with Chinese clients for more than 12 years. What do the Chinese clients, in my experience, do differently? What we see generally is there is a little bit of a less transparency on the high-level decision making compared to the Western counterparties. That's been also one of the findings in the report. Very often, the top-level decision makers are not copied in the correspondence. Very often, we see Chinese clients coming back to us and saying, "Well, this is what the CEO decided." So the transparency level is lower, and that's somewhat expected. The other experience that we have seen over the years is that very often Chinese clients and those involved in BRI projects are rushing on opportunities. They move very close to the end of it, almost towards the signing stage of a project, and then they have second thoughts. One of the examples that we had was an airport concession project in Bulgaria, which was awarded to a Chinese leading Chinese consortium and then abandoned at the last stage. I have here another example of what the Chinese clients do differently. If you work with Chinese clients, you normally have WeChat as a standard communication channel. This is something that most of our colleagues find difficult in the beginning, but then it's very user-friendly. What lawyers find that Chinese clients do differently is that sometimes lawyers are being considered as a commodity and not always appreciated for the value that they can bring into a large-scale project or a very complicated project. Last but not least, there is a much bigger level of state control. I still remember a transaction which was very complicated transaction, and there was this time pressure, and at the end of the transaction there was this blank period of 10 days which was never moved and was never shrinked. And I asked the counterparty, why couldn't we just shrink this final piece of period? And then they said, no, that's unthinkable. This is the party approval period. So this is something that we need to of course keep in mind. Now, moving to a more positive topic, what in my opinion the Chinese clients do better. Definitely, they have a more hands-on approach on new projects and matters. And one clear example was of a conference call with the board of the client, and they called me apologizing that we will have the call at 9 p.m. Bulgarian time, and I just realized that it was 3 a.m. In China, but nevertheless we did the call, and it was a successful call, and we did the project. Obviously, Chinese clients are much faster, and they have a much more decisive approach. There was a situation where the Swiss entity of a Chinese investor was being delayed in registration. So in our conference room, we were having the negotiations, and the Chinese counterparty was looking in the eye the Central and Eastern European partners, and they just asked the question, do I trust you? I think I do. And what they did was they wired 12 million euros without finalizing the structure. So it was a very decisive moment, and the project went very successfully. The Chinese clients are definitely focused on the core of the matters. Usually what we have is somebody in charge for the project. There is somebody intermediary, like a higher in the corporate ladder, and the CEO. So very fast you can escalate this decision making to the CEO and get a decision, which is quite important on those projects. The adaptability of Chinese clients is obviously working in their favor. And last but not least, I think Chinese clients move to new territories and have new products released very fast. I can give an example that we have a client that we have met just once, but we are representing this company across the entire Europe. Now, very fast moving to my experience and the standard barriers that Chinese counterparties face. Usually they approach the markets as if this is China, and in China you have the top-down decision making, very strong leadership, and they use former executives in Central and Eastern Europe, which is not always very successful for them. There are huge language and cultural difficulties. Sometimes we are asked by clients to compare ourselves to other law firms, which is not very traditional for Western culture and so on. And last but not least, I think sometimes Chinese clients focus less on the feasibility study and studying the market conditions, and then in the middle of the deal, sometimes they have second thoughts. Finally, on my end, what is my experience on the standard barriers that we as lawyers face dealing with Chinese clients? This is a long topic, but let me just say that the fees and the topics of fees is usually very difficult to handle. We have serious cultural differences. We have a very recent case covering the entire Europe, where CMS was asked to act also as a business advisor, sometimes going beyond the legal. But this is something that's being well appreciated by the client. Having too many jurisdictions in EU and in CEE is a clear barrier, and I think here with our coverage as CMS, we can provide this one-stop shop as a law firm that can coordinate the requirements elsewhere. So this concludes my remarks. I hope we can go back to Nicholas now, if his system works well. Thank you, Marcin.
Thank you, Costa. Nicholas, could we check that whether we can hear you?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
We hear you this time. Great. Nicholas, okay. It seems that everything functions properly now. So please share with us your views on the Chinese sentiment towards foreign investments, especially in CEE.
Okay, sorry for the inconvenience just now about the technical issues. And throughout all the researchers that we saw a strong divergence in sentiment between our international and the Chinese respondents regarding their sentiments on the BRI and also the BRI 2.0. And the Chinese respondents are much more positive about the BRI in the past and also the BRI in future. Our research has shown us that the sentiment in China is generally much more positive across every measurement of the BRI projects than our international respondents. 58 of the Chinese participants expect to increase their involvement in the BRI project, whereas only 10% plans to reduce it. It is perhaps unsurprising that given the level of focus of BRI by the Chinese government, that we always see that in China you have lots of projects, and once it's related to a BRI project, it will attract the encouragement or the attention and the support of the local government. Next slide. We also asked questions about whether Chinese participants are satisfied or the international participants are satisfied with the BRI project. The results show that the majority of the Chinese respondents are satisfied with the process and outcome of the involvement in BRI projects, but for the international participants, only 37%. So we can see this there is a very big difference. The Chinese business are often in the driving seats for BRI projects. It may explain why their experience had been much more positive overall. And Chinese authorities often emphasize that the key aspect of Belt and Road cooperation is the principle of consultation and cooperation for shared benefits, as well as spirit of openness, inclusiveness, and transparency. However, this is not always the case for the other participants. China clearly understands the desirability of making BRI more attractive to non-Chinese participants, which is also mentioned in the new version, the BRI 2.0 initiative show. Next slide, please. And we also asked the question, how would you rate the process of participating in the BRI rates project based on your experience? The result shows that 40% of the Chinese respondents agree that the BRI project has been more challenging than they expected. The variety of the BRI is one of the things that can make it challenging for some participants. The markets involved are very different, and what works in one place may not work in another jurisdiction. Different participants also have their different concerns and approaches. More crucially, while the initiative enjoys strong official support from the China government, there is no single coordinating an organization which is responsible for the BRI project as a whole. Over 2/3 of the international respondents, that means 69%, found the process of participating in the BRI-related projects are much more challenging than they had expected. The same was true for only 40% of the Chinese respondents, who found that a wide variety of challenges, including the unexpected legal and regulatory disturbance, interference from the local authorities, unanticipated complexity, inadequate technology, awkward cultural difference, and problematic cooperators. Many Chinese participants also feel that China's vision for BRI is not sufficiently appreciated internationally. Next slide, please. So what are the top sectors for future Chinese investments? From the results, we see that the top sectors for future Chinese investment included logistics, energy network, and the road. In every sector we look at, we found that a greater percentage of Chinese respondents than the international respondents had targeted BRI opportunities. This reflects the greater involvement to date of Chinese organizations across a wide breadth of BRI activities. Overall, the Chinese respondents said that they plan to target opportunities in these top three sectors. It's clear that the interest for more modern and sustainable sectors such as smart cities and the renewable is increasingly significant. The core of the BRI project, infrastructure for trade, is also expected to remain strong. And 40% of the Chinese participants are looking to the target opportunities in smart cities, and 43% will target opportunities in the renewable energy sectors. Now we can see the new coming is the BRI 2.0. So the BRI 2.0 is considered as a new BRI initiative, which is launched in 2019 by the Chinese government. So the new BRI 2.0, so as set for some principles. One is to pursue the cooperation to improve lives and promote sustainable development. Also, another principle is to follow the international rules and standards. And another principle is to commit to transparency and clean governance. So our research shows that the majority of the Chinese respondents expect the BRI 2.0 will be more transparent than the BRI in the past. Only 9% think it will not be the case. On the contrary, the international respondents think that only 15% of the international respondents expect it will be more transparent, whereas 9% think it will not be. As you can see, there's a big difference between the international and the Chinese respondents regarding expectation of the BRI 2.0. The key drives of the BRI 2.0 is to enable more non-Chinese participants to join in the BRI 2.0, to share knowledge and to spare the risk, and also to increase the standards and the qualities in the BRI project. Our findings shows that the Chinese respondents are significantly more optimistic about BRI 2.0 delivering their intention, with 84% believing that the sustainability and the environment considerations will be given greater importance when planning and completing projects. The Chinese BRI participants are increasingly aware that sustainable projects tend to lead to fewer disputes. Furthermore, we can see that Chinese financial institutions increase their focus on sustainable projects. A number of projects that cannot show financial viabilities for sustainability have recently been refused by the banks. As an official report from the Office of Leading Group for Promoting the Belt and Road Initiative noted last year, the Belt and Road Initiative is in urgent need of finance. This means that finance from non-Chinese participants and sources. And China understands that to attract these finance, projects will have to embrace principles such as sustainability, where they are required by the international banks and also other sources of funding. Instruments such as green bonds, which is now draw more and more attention to the Chinese government, is likely to play an increasing role in the financing many BRI projects. As we can notice, China has been the largest green bond market in the world. While much traditional infrastructure will remain central to the BRI 2.0, digital technology will also become an increasing importance focus area. China has launched out the Digital Silk Road initiative as well as one of part of the BRI project. So this is officially, the notion is mentioned in the year 2015 and then officially announced in 2017 by the President Xi Jinping, and then the official plan is launched in 2019 in the second BRI Forum for International Cooperation. So as we can see that nowadays, the statistics shows that from the year 2018 to 2019, around 200 Chinese enterprises has participated in 1,130 overseas digital projects, including areas of China, East Asia, and also the CEE region, Middle Asia, and also Africa. Digital Silk Road projects are traditionally BRI-style infrastructure, such as submarine communications cable and mobile phone networks in remote regions. In some cases, they are intended to improve connectivity between other BRI projects. But there is an increasing sense that the Digital Silk Road can potentially cover all types of digital development along the Belt and Road areas, including the fintech, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, smart cities, and the digital healthcare. Many projects so far have been focused on meeting local development goals, but others are commercial ventures that reflect the worldwide advance of the digital economy, which enable China tech business, including e-commerce giants, the social media networks, and the fintech providers to access new markets. And the Digital Silk Road also creates demand for other sectors such as telecom equipment companies, smart sensors, data centers, etc. Some respondents are keen to be also involved in the Digital Silk Road project, but they are worried of potential problems such as the rapidly evolving technical standard issues and also some local sentiment about the cybersecurity issues, which is also one of the key and the significant concerns for them. Thank you. This is all my part.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, for your summary and very interesting points. There is a country in the world where BRI proved to be especially successful, and it's time now for us to tell more, to hear more about the success stories relating to the BRI investments. Vladimir, could you tell us a bit about these aspects of BRI initiative?
Sure, absolutely. Before we do that, I just wanted to run a quick sound check and to see if you can hear my low range of voice and the beard, which is barely growing for Russian purposes. Is everything okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so just assuming control of the mouse now. I'm trying to move on to the next slide. I'm trying quite short to leave enough headroom to the next speaker and probably the Q&A session as well, because I'm sure there's enough of the questions cropping up there. The answer to the obvious question about why Russia is obviously a result of the following key factors being intertwined very tightly. Russia's got a very long history of being at the crossroads between East and West, hence the double-headed eagle as part of the national symbol. But in fact, really at the center of the crossroads. By far the largest territory in the world, and what will be even more important for China as one of the world's largest importer of hydrocarbons, holding the world's largest natural gas reserves. I want to speak about the projects. There's going to be a number of very clear examples of that. But when we speak about the history, it's not just the fact that Russia's always been large and out there, it's also about the fact how Russia developed. It's not just the long history, it's the ability to really quickly catch up on the gap in the technology and the industrialization. If we go back to 1880s where it just started, and even more so in the Soviet days when they built the famous BAM, which is Baikal-Amur main line, all of this showed as an evidence of the country being able to work so hard and so quickly in a very limited time frame, which makes it very similar to China and creates another obvious reason to make the partnership. So geography, a lot of geography speaks for itself, and in addition to that, of course, the current geopolitical architecture whereby China is making its effort to expand. Obviously, we're seeing all of that. And Russia is trying to establish itself in the post-Soviet space, hence the Eurasian Economic Union, some members of which are the good old neighbors Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. And as we will talk about the projects further, we'll see that they're a huge part of the game. And of course, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan are the countries together with whom Russia shares the legacy of probably the largest land border with China, which is thousands of kilometers, which creates, of course, a lot of opportunity for both nations. If we talk about the landscape of the projects that we've witnessed and seen successful, the obvious way to group them is by sector. And number one would be oil and gas for Russia. No surprises here. Starting probably with Yamal, which is probably one of the most high-profile projects, highest capex. And when we talk about LNG, as we say in Russia, we mean Novatek. When we speak Novatek, we mean LNG. One of the most successful independent gas companies in Russia. Number 12 to Gazprom, probably. One of the most successful listings in London back in 2005. Extremely successful in attracting international investment. When we move to upstream and downstream, it's very interesting because we see we see the same names basically, and we see how they carefully balance and diversify their portfolios of investments. It's quite ambitious upstream plays. If we take the examples of CEE and Bejm gas, and Verkhnechonsk. At the same time, focusing on where they're really strong in terms of expertise, because Bejm gas are very well known for their successful development of compressed natural gas stations in China, so taking the benefit of their gas resources, which is what they're now importing on the Russian turf. The thing is that in Russia we have a governmental program for moving public transportation from the conventional gasoline to CNG, and that's where the synergy comes really. Baltic Chemical Complex is basically a gas processing plant and an example of where CNC is coming quite far from the home turf to the Russian northwest. And Sinopec, of course, going back to upstream, basically sitting in the best, by far the best oil producing asset of Rosneft, which is Udmurtneft. And here comes the second of the sector, which is transport infrastructure. We've got basically the full house here, going across pretty much any type of infrastructure you would expect to be part of the Belt and Road. Starting, of course, with the Power of Siberia, which is 3,000-kilometer mammoth pipeline requiring billions of dollars of investment, connecting the Russian Arctic north to the Chinese off-takers. The examples of CMS's involvement include Vladivostok, which is an interesting project because it's redevelopment of international airport and something that may not be so obvious in the BRI context, which is probably focused on land and sea routes. But of course, it comes not without a political push and also the involvement of the relevant players on the state side. We're going to talk about the increasing role of the Russian state in the economy a bit later. The other example is Rubicon and Amur, which is the famous project for the construction of a railroad border crossing over the Amur River in the Russian Far East, initially targeted to carry Russian coal and other minerals to the Chinese off-takers as well. It was taken over by Russia-China Investment Fund, the co-investment vehicle between Russian Direct Investment Fund, the Russian Sovereign Wealth Fund, and CEE, the powerhouse sovereign investor from China, from the Russian gold mining company Petropavlovsk. A clear success story. And another interesting one, I think, is Meridian Highway, because not only it goes across Kazakhstan and Russia, connecting basically China directly inland to the western border of Russia, and basically creating that famous corridor to Europe, but also because it's almost exclusively funded from private sources. Now, what makes it so successful? Why are all these projects so great? It is very careful balancing between it's a balancing act between involving both sovereign players and private businesses. In Russia, there's a lot of talk about increasing role of state. That's why we're getting a bit more like China, with, of course, the involvement not only on the government itself at the regulatory level, but the whole range of government control entities, and more involvement of the government in taking control over companies at times. So it's, of course, national oil companies, we talk about oil and gas sector. It's sovereign wealth funds who go across a range of industries, especially infrastructure, and state banks who are, of course, always in the game for PF. On the private side, it would be industry players with the relevant expertise, who know exactly what needs to be done and how, and most of the time possessing the relevant technology, together with whom you normally group some of the high net worth individuals, like Oleg Deripaska's Basel, who are very well known for their involvement in the development of Russian airport infrastructure, just to take an example. And of course, the financial investors like BRI Vostok, who are an extremely well-known player in the Russian private equity market. So what we have discovered in all of these deals, including those we specifically acted on, unfortunately not all of them I can disclose for the time being, but it's not just a joint venture as such. If we make a step back and look at the wider picture of what's the broader spectrum of project stakeholders here, we discover, quite importantly, Chinese suppliers of certain equipment that is either lacking in our country or that is more competitive than the similar equipment produced in the EU or the US. And all of that is then funded by the Chinese banks. So essentially, some of these projects are done at the back of the financing, incentivizing Chinese exports and shared by Chinese banks who can offer very, very competitive terms, including the rate, of course, and the security package. And all of that is notwithstanding the naturally introduced local content requirements who are always in the play. That's why you've got Russian contractors there all the time. All of that, of course, naturally paves the way to market entries and establishes even more solid foothold for the future expansion of China into European and other markets. So basically, what the Chinese are doing, they're ticking all the right boxes, not only BRI, but actually market entries, reinforcing their positions in markets all the way through. So it's a combined play, exercising exerting their soft power. And as a dessert, and possibly a short bridge to the next speaker, a small illustration of how ambitious the modern political leadership of China and Russia is. They're basically giving themselves quite a bit of headroom, until 2024, but the bold objective is to double the current level of trade to $200 billion US. And the COVID pandemic does not seem to be denouncing these plans whatsoever. On that note, it seems high time for me to hand over to Ju, who I'm sure will cover the numbers in more detail and speaks about his stuff. Thank you, Ju. Over to you now.
Thanks a lot, Vladimir. Can everyone hear me clearly? All right, so let me just start my part. All right, sorry. moving too quick. All right, it's quite interesting to see the findings by CMS, and just like CMS, Mothers is we covering the 17+1 countries, almost cover all the 70+1 countries across the CE region through our integrated structures, and we're quite lucky to be involved into several large transactions in the past, including the one of the largest white goods M&A transactions, including the largest PV projects in the CE and also the railway projects. So I think it's time for us to show some numbers as a finance advisor. It can be bring some different insights of the Belt and Road experience. So we observed that first of all, I would like to just put some disclaimer on the data, because as someone mentioned earlier, there is no actually a database to do that. We have to process the data based on limited resources. So based on our observation, we noticed that the bilateral trade value between the two country and region, I mean China and the CEE, and there's a obvious trend as a increasing. However, compared to the whole Chinese foreign trade, the Chinese CEE bilateral trade still very small, only counting as 2% of the total amount in 2018. And if we look at the detail of the trade, we notice that actually the trade between China and CEE countries are quite diversified. And there are lots of goods. Actually, we provide a commentary to each other. If we look closer, we can see the overlapped part is mainly focused on the machinery and equipment, but we, as China, import a lot of things like car parts, industry products, and furnitures from CE countries, and we, as China, export a lot of white goods, toys, and other mainly low value added products. So that's one of our observations regarding the trade. If we look at the investment flow, we notice that compared to some hotspot along the Belt and Road, CE countries still very low. If we look at the charts, we can see that compared to Singapore, we only like close to 1/3 of we're only the 1/10 of the 10% of the Singapore, the flows into the Singapore. And as all the experts just mentioned, that investment are concentrated in infrastructure and low value added manufacturers. There's lack of investments in the technology and innovations and high-end manufacturers. And another observation, we noticed that there's a new trend along the Belt and Road, that is to organize or establish the industrial park along the Belt and Road countries. However, we still notice, we still say that the hottest spot for establish the industrial park is staying in the Asia Pacific countries. There's only 7 of the industrial parks located in the 17 countries in the CE region. And lots of them still are in a very early stage of construction, or even just planned, just have an idea. And even for those already established, we see quite limited supporting services and very difficult to attract investments. And if we look at the countries, we would like to present some activities about through the M&A activities, because we believe the M&A can reflect the reality very quickly. We noticed a lot of activities throughout the years. However, it's going down year by year. There's a lot of reasons for that. If we have time, we can discuss later. Of course, the country with the biggest economy received the largest attentions from Chinese investment. That's including Russia, Czech Republic, and Poland. And a lot of industry, such as the energy, that's the biggest one. That's a big one. Then industry and consumer goods, that's top 3 categories receiving the investments from China. And if we look at the structure, like the structure of the buyers, we notice that more and more private companies join the force, becoming the main buyers from China. And the top 3 sectors are consumer goods industry and TMT. Okay, so I try to went through the data very quickly. I don't know whether Marcin, do you still have a bit of time for Q&A?
Please go ahead with this part.
All right. So actually, through our service to the client, we notice there's a lot of common issues. Let's say common issues and challenges faced not only by the investors, the Chinese investors. Actually, I have to say our as an advisor, we also need to take some of the blames. Like just Nicholas mentioned, it's very difficult to working with the Chinese as an advisor. That is why we set up a China desk to facilitate as a bridge to helping the two sides, to balancing the two sides. And we noticed that the biggest issue from the Chinese investors, especially for the M&A perspective, they are only focused on the targets available for sale. That's why that's the biggest problem, because normally if the targets as only for sale, we only know that for sale, normally a lot of potential buyer already passed them. So that means either the target itself is it's not really good, or somehow I don't know, maybe there's some issues on that. Or when the Chinese buyer being approached, there's a very high competition among all the potential buyers. So that is how in the past years, a lot of Chinese investments are paid with a high premium. So this is one of our observations we noticed. And the other parts, the Chinese buyers always lack of plans and strategy. They don't know what they're going to do, why they're doing that. Most of the time, it's purely, how do I say, it's purely speculative investment rather than a thoughtful plan. So there's no plan backed. And like other advisors just mentioned, Chinese investors still a lack of experience working with different cultures and under different legal and business environment. So this is our observations about that. So that is why we suggest, if you would like to, as a Chinese investment investor, if you want to be successful conducting M&A activities, you should do a lot of homework before, have a good plan, and working closer with the advisors, like legal advisors such as CMS and others as a financial advisor. And most importantly, just signing the SPA is not the end of M&A. A lot of work still need to be done post M&A. So a lot of integration work need to be done. Again, working with the advisor is very important. That's our suggestions. Regarding our outlook, it's quite similar to the experts from CMS just presented. Still will be a lot of focus on the infrastructures. However, there will be new infrastructures such as the TMT communication. This type of new infrastructures will be showing up in the future. A lot of more and more attentions and focus will be on the green energy. Because of the COVID, people notice that it's very important to reorganize the supply chain to avoid the incidents like COVID. Again, focus on the technology and innovation is always the core of the Chinese M&A. So this is our observations about the and the outlook for the future. Thank you, Marcin.
Thank you very much. It was extremely interesting. We plan to have the Q&A session at the end of our webinar. But unfortunately, we ran out of time, and we will skip the Q&A part. However, I believe that our audience found the presentation very informative. I can promise that we will get back to those of participants that ask their questions as soon as possible after our webinar. Thank you very much to you all for joining us, and thank you to our speakers. If you would like any further information, please don't hesitate to get in touch with any of our speakers today, and the report will be available at the cms.law/BRI tomorrow. Thank you very much for your attention.